asked for appreciation. You'll remember he did supposedly help get these students out of China. The athletes then thanked him publicly. But LeVar Ball, who's a piece of work in his own right? The outspoken father of one of the UCLA players, LiAngelo Ball, he's casting doubt on the role of the president. The president heard this, and he did what he does most often, responded in kind. Now that the three basketball players are out of China and saved from years in jail, LeVar Ball, the father of LiAngelo, is unaccepting of what I did for his son and that shoplifting is no big deal. I should have left them in China.
The president went on. Shoplifting is a very big deal in China, as it should be, 5 to 10 years in jail, but not to Father LeVar. Should have gotten his son out during my next trip to China instead. China told them why they were released. Very ungrateful. The president also ripped into Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona. In an open mic moment, Senator Flake referred to the Republican Party as toast if President Trump and Roy Moore were allowed to define it. The president then fired back. Senator Jeff Flakey, who is unelectable in the great state of Arizona, quit race, anemic polls, was caught purposely on mic saying bad things about your favorite president. He'll be a no on tax cuts because his political career, anyway, is toast.
Are you a toast person or an English muffin or a bagel person?
I like toast, whole grain.
Toast gets a bad name. All right, let's bring in CNN contributor and Donald Trump biographer Michael D'Antonio and associate editor of Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stoddard. So how do you see it, A.B.? On the one hand, this is what he does. No target too small, no indignity goes suffered. So is this just more of the same, or have we seen a new and lower bar for the president actually saying that he should have left American citizens to rot in a Chinese jail?
I don't think anyone's surprised that he said that. I think his supporters, as we always talk about, will never disapprove. And I do think that let's start with the fact that these guys with incredible opportunity before them really, this is a shameful act. They did not deny that they shoplifted sunglasses in China, and it's embarrassing to the country. It's wrong, and they were right to thank the president. He, as we were here on Friday, talked about, was back on like a positive note with his tweets, talking about the pitfalls on the road of life and to take great care of themselves. And Mr. Ball was rude, and but that's that's an aside. President Trump always takes the bait. He always wants more credit. He wants to be thanked. He believes, that people are ungrateful and it's a disgrace. And he always does this kind of thing. But I do think the intensity and the reason he was doing it last night was because there was an ABC News piece out about the fact that Mueller is now, the special counsel is now looking for communications, documents from the Department of Justice about the recusal in the Russia probe of the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, as well as the firing of Comey, which indicates he's honing in, of course, on obstruction of justice. So I do think sometimes the timing has to do with Russia, even though it is sort of typical Trump to blow back on these things and stoke the culture wars.
So, Michael, what do you think? Because just to remind our viewers, you, of course, are the Donald Trump biographer. You've studied him for decades. So that's the question. Is this just his usual reflex, or is it all a strategic distraction because of the Russia investigation and other things boiling in the political sphere?
Well, Allison, I think it can be both. I think that he does have this reflex, but we also know that Mr. Ball has this method as well. So probably the only two people in the country who are really happy about this are President Trump and Mr. Ball. This is a game. They're both playing the game. It serves them both. For the president, it does distract the media and the country from his troubles with the special counsel Mueller. And for Mr. Ball, this is part of his effort to monetize fame. This is a game that actually Donald Trump almost invented, monetizing fame. You seek the attention, as he says, any attention is better than no attention. And so now we have a guy that Chris called a piece of work who's jabbing at the White House troll, and the rest of the country gets to watch. And the only people who are doing the shameful thing here are the president and the basketball player's father. When I look at a guy in his 70s engaging in this kind of behavior, and then I see some college students who shoplifted some sunglasses, I actually see a disparity, and I see the president acting unpresidential. You know, those kids did the wrong thing, foolish. They had adults intervene on their behalf. Mr. Ball should have been grateful, but, you know, there's no money in being grateful, and there's no political gain for the president in being gracious.
So this is a win-win on one side. The president bringing up Marshawn Lynch, an NFL player, on not standing for the anthem at a game in Mexico City. That plays to a culture divide that the president believes works to his benefit. This, the same thing, ungrateful kids, they should have thanked me, that works. But then, AB, we have the Jeff Flake tweet, okay? And that's not about some faux sense of morality in Americana. It's about the expediency of how to explain what happens with the tax bill. Let's put up that tweet. He has some fun with Flake. Flaky attacks him for his lack of political future, which is fair. He'll be a no on tax cuts because his political career anyway is toast. Now, an unintended truth probably there by the president. That's right. When you don't have to worry about getting elected anymore, you just vote your conscience, which is what everybody thinks you were put there to do in the first place. But this is different. This isn't just playing on a culture divide. This is about manipulating how people see the battle over the tax plan, right?
Right. Look, no matter who votes against this bill on the Senate floor, President Trump, no matter what policy grounds they will be arguing their no vote, but President Trump will go after them likely because that's sort of what he's done this whole year. Right now, without Senator Flake having any reservations, there are 5 senators, Murkowski, McCain, Senator Johnson, and then, of course, Senators Collins and Corker, who have different reasons why they have concerns with the bill, ranging from deficit problems. There are some fiscal hawks remaining in the Republican Party in Congress, though not many left. And then, of course, issues on the more moderate side about what stripping out the individual mandate will do to health care premiums and how that increase in premiums could actually wipe out what any benefits they get from a tax cut. And so you're already looking at 5 senators that could bring the bill down because they can only lose 2. But Senator Flake, the president has a personal beef, obviously, with Senator Flake, who's been extremely critical of the president, very out in the open about it, wrote a book about it, and subsequently could not get reelected in a primary in Arizona because of it. But it was funny the way he described it, like he was purposefully caught on a open mic, and we know that Senator Flake has said everything he said on that mic in public already. So it wasn't meant to be an interview and public comments, but it's not inconsistent at all with what Senator Flake has said. And again, it's something that he has an axe to grind with Flake, and he's going to stay after him and try to make it sound, if he opposes it on deficit grounds, like he's doing it because it's a personal political spat.
Michael, one last tweet that I want to get your response to. This is from Congressman Adam Schiff. And he was talking about the president tweeting about wishing that he had left these basketball players, these American citizens and kids in, this Chinese prison to rot. Adam Schiff writes, the president would have left American students in a foreign jail because their families didn't lavish sufficient praise on him. How can someone in such a big office be so small? And I'm wondering, as well as you know Donald Trump and have studied him, does he get affected by those comments, or can he compartmentalize and sort of dismiss them as, well, that's a Democrat, who cares? But when somebody says that he's acting small, or Jeff Flake comments about him in an open mic, then what happens with President Trump?
Well, he sees a dramatic opportunity. This is another enemy for him to go up against. It's actually something that serves him very well. The president is not put off by this. I think for people to think that he stews over a poke at him from Adam Schiff is incorrect. If it were someone in his own party, a senator who might vote against the tax bill, then I think he might get his back up. But this is something he will dismiss, or he'll call Schiff some crazy name. The world will be entertained, and some people will be aghast and think, well, what is going on in Washington? But we're now accustomed to this. This is the routine. So it's useful for him dramatically and keeps our minds off of the serious business. You know, this is a problem, though, I think, for his legislative agenda. The reason that Flakey and Corker and everybody else is lining up against him is they actually oppose his policies, and he's not doing anything to court them.
Flakey, see, it sticks. Well, one thing's for sure. We'll know if the president doesn't like something that's said about him, because he will respond.
Right.
That's what he does. Mr. D'Antonio, Ms. Stoddard, thank you very much as always. So, LeVar Ball made a good play here. If what you want is attention, so many of you now have heard his name, you're going to be Googling him. So what was in this for him? Was this really about his son? Did he just make a good choice in terms of baiting the president and winning? Let's get his take. He's going to join us tonight on CNN Tonight. I'm filling in for Don Lemon. So 10 p.m. Eastern, you'll hear from LeVar Ball why he decided to go with the most powerful man in the world.
And we will recap that for you tomorrow morning as well. Can't wait.
Indeed. Why sleep when I can be here with you?
Great point. Meanwhile, we do have some breaking news for you. Charles Manson has died. The cult leader masterminded the gruesome murders of 7 people in Los Angeles during the summer of 1969. CNN's Stephanie Elam is live in Los Angeles with these breaking details. Stephanie.
Good morning, Allison. Those gruesome murders that were carried out, murdering 7 people that left the nation horrified. Well, the man behind it has now died of natural causes. And that turned out to be 9 life-term sentences that Manson was serving out here in California. And as far as trying to get out of jail, he did try to do that. He tried to get parole, and it was denied 12 times, Chris.
All right, Stephanie, thank you very much. Appreciate the reporting on this. All right, so I don't know if you saw it this morning, but don't worry, we got you covered. What do you do with 25 years of sports history and amazing memories in the Georgia Dome? You blow them up. Wait for it. Wait for it. This was all planned. Don't worry about that. This is about making the room for more development.
That's good. Somebody didn't just accidentally
Well, you don't
that.
know. You're waking up, you look at the TV.
That would have been really a problem.
You know, Lord knows the things we have going on in the world. But this was planned. The Georgia Dome hosted Super Bowls, the Olympics, the NCAAs. I mean, it was huge. It's been replaced by the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's already up next door. The new stadium is home to the NFL's Atlanta Falcons and Major League Soccer in a puff of smoke.
I like the sentimentality that you're going for here. I really do. I do. No, I really do.
More and more as it
no,
goes on.
I really do. I, too, am nostalgic. I don't like getting rid of 25 years of memories, but who doesn't like a good implosion in the morning?
You seem to be in conflict.
I am conflicted. That is true. Meanwhile, Jared Kushner's attorney disputing claims that his client has not been upfront about Russia contacts. He accuses senators of playing gotcha games. Next. An attorney for President Trump's son-in-law and top aide, Jared Kushner, says the Senate Judiciary Committee is playing political gotcha games. He's pushing back against claims that Jared Kushner failed to turn over documents related to the Russia investigation. CNN's Evan Perez interviewed Kushner's attorney, and he joins us live from Washington. So what did he say in this interview?
Well, Allison, when it comes to contacts involving Russians during the 2016 campaign, Jared Kushner has been forgetful. He's been slow to acknowledge over the last few months, from his failure to list them in his security clearance application earlier this year to this past week when the Judiciary Committee in the Senate sent him a bipartisan and public letter saying he hadn't turned over documents that the committee knew existed. The documents we're talking about include Kushner's communications with the fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, Kushner's security clearance forms, campaign contacts with WikiLeaks, and a curious Russian backdoor proposal to connect the Russian President Vladimir Putin with the campaign, an idea, by the way, that Kushner rejected. Now, in this interview with me, Abby Lowell, Kushner's attorney, pushes back against those accusations. Take a listen.
In my communications with the Senate Judiciary Committee, I said, take these documents and let's talk about what else is relevant. They jumped the gun to make a media event. And any perception that Mr. Kushner has been anything but not only cooperative, but if you look at the contents of these emails, he's the hero. He's the one who's saying there shouldn't be any contacts with foreign officials or foreign entities. That's what the Senate Judiciary Committee should pay attention to and not create some sort of partisan gotcha game.
And by the way, that was a bipartisan letter that was sent to Kushner. The bottom line here, though, is that Kushner is not promising to do an interview with the Senate Judiciary Committee. And while his attorney is saying that he's cooperating with Congress, Kushner has another investigation to keep in mind. That's the criminal investigation that's being led by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. And right now, Mueller is still working through the roster of White House officials who are coming in for interviews, including this week. We expect Kushner is going to be one of those interviews. Allison?
All right, I'll take it, Evan. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. What an interesting set of circumstances that we have going on with this investigation. Let's get some more insight. Joining us now is Benjamin Wittes, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution and editor-in-chief of the blog Lawfare. He's also a friend of fired FBI Director Jim Comey. Good to have you, sir.
Nice to be here.
Have you been in recent contact with Mr. Comey, by the way?
Wouldn't say if I had.
Because?
Because the relationship is a private friendship, and I'm not here speaking on his behalf, and so any communications that we might have are irrelevant, frankly.
Well, they're certainly not irrelevant, right? Because so much of your insight into these issues comes from an informed perspective of knowing what Comey thinks about them, right?
I actually like to think that if that's the reason why people want to talk to me, you know, I said everything that I had to say about my conversations with Jim months ago, and so there would be that would be a weak basis on which to want to talk to me now.
Well, everybody is a diamond. You have many facets, Mr. Wittes. That's just one of them. You certainly have other values as well, like your political and legal analysis. So let's harness those right now. When it comes to Comey, we'll get into Kushner and what you think about that. But you know what the political pushback is. The political pushback is you want to look at these questions about the Trump campaign, fine, but you must also look at the Clinton campaign and the events surrounding her side of this situation. And Jim Comey looms large for these critics. They say he should be looked at because he called the investigation a matter, because he seemed to have been drafting an exoneration note for Clinton before the investigation was up. Do you believe that there is any merit to these types of charges and that they warrant investigation?
No.
Yes.
But I also don't think there's any harm, particularly like any public figure exercising significant authority. Jim's actions are reasonably subject to question, and I don't think there's any particular harm in revisiting judgments that any public official made. That said, it's an effort to change the subject. And the subject that we should all be focused on is the question of, first of all, the underlying conduct that the Russia investigation was constituted to investigate, and secondly, the circumstances of the president's gross interference with that investigation up to and including firing the person who was running it.
Well, push back on the other side, though, because they connect the dots. I mean, they go all the way up to Mueller, who was once celebrated as a great choice for special counsel, lifelong Republican. They say, well, here's how the argument goes. He was at the FBI during the Uranium One deal. The Uranium One deal is about Russia. He had information that he didn't act on when he was at the head of the FBI about contributions, so he's tainted. Comey is connected because Clinton is connected to Russia because of the dossier, so anybody who was trying to clear her of problems was trying to help her in her efforts to harness Russian efforts to interfere in the election, so Comey has to be looked at. That's their whole rationale for why this is about Russia. But to the substantive matters, do you think there's an issue with calling the probe a matter versus an investigation? And do you think it's true that he was drafting a she's off the hook note before the investigation was over?
So, first of all, as to the taint of everybody associated with this investigation, I would say that just listening to your question just now sounded a little bit like looking at Congressman Gomert's chart from the Sessions hearing the other day. And there's a reason, you know, that when you look at a chart like that, it looks crazy, and that's that there's actually, these are like conspiracy theories
Yes.
that don't really have any merit to them. The idea that Bob Mueller, of all people, is going to cut Hillary Clinton a break because he was in office when the CFIUS process cleared the Uranium One deal is just not worth the time to talk about. It's a silly, stupid idea, and it's not. We shouldn't dignify it with a serious conversation. As to whether Jim began thinking about or drafting a statement exonerating or ending the investigation before the investigation was complete, you know, I have news for you. Sometimes Supreme Court justices start working on draft opinions as a way of thinking through stuff before oral arguments. Sometimes, you know, people think about how they're going to talk about something before the entirety of the work is done. There's nothing remotely wrong with that. And the idea that we should reopen the Hillary Clinton email matter because some people object to the timing of the drafting of a statement that will either live or die on the merits of what was said in it is just silly.
And look, point to your perspective on this. We saw Jeff Sessions push back on Representative Jim Jordan about the need for a special counsel on these matters. He said sometimes looking like something isn't enough of a factual basis for actual investigation. That was Jeff Sessions who said that in front of a House panel. Jared Kushner, what is your take on his exposure here and on his cooperation to this point?
So without knowing precisely what he testified to, as in the specific words that he said in response to the specific question, and without having all the evidence available about what his precise state of mind was when he said whatever he said, there's no real way to answer that question except to say that the sequence of omissions from things that he's put in his security clearance, from things that he's delivered to the committees, from things that he's said, the sequence of omissions is profoundly embarrassing, should be profoundly embarrassing to him, and will raise suspicions with investigators. And you know what the merits of those are, I can't say sitting here, and by the way, neither can anyone else. But I do think, you know, every time Kushner or one of the other senior Trump administration officials makes a representation about the quality, frequency, and type of contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian government officials or their agents, those turn out to be at best incomplete or sometimes just wrong. And I do think that's the kind of thing that investigators, both on the congressional side and on the criminal side, take very seriously.
Benjamin Wittes, always appreciate your take, and thank you for taking on the arguments on both sides.
My pleasure.
Allison.
Okay, Chris, after winning the release of 3 American basketball players from China, President Trump now says he should have left them in jail. What do his Republican supporters think? That's next. President Trump now says he should not have helped free 3 UCLA basketball players arrested for shoplifting in China. This after one of the players' fathers downplayed the president's role in securing their release. Joining us now to talk about this and so much more, we have Republican Congressman Scott Taylor of Virginia. Your tie looks good, Congressman. No need for adjustment.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to have you here. Let me read the president's tweet from yesterday about these UCLA players. He says, now that the 3 basketball players are out of China and saved from years in jail, LeVar Ball, the father of LiAngelo, is unaccepting of what I did for his son, and that shoplifting is no big deal. I should have left them in jail. Do you understand what the president is saying there?
Sure, I understand what he's saying. I mean, I don't think as leaders we should seek out credit, but I will say these, his tweets are very effective because most Americans would agree with him. I mean, I just did some reading about China's punishment for theft, and it's a minimum 3 years in jail, maximum 10 years in jail. So it is a big deal. Shoplifting is a big deal in China.
It is a big deal,
and,
but do you, I mean, just to clarify, do you think that most Americans would agree with the president that an American college student should be left to rot in a Chinese jail?
No. I don't believe that at all. But what I'm saying is I think most Americans, most everyday Americans, would agree that the father should be appreciative that the president helped his son out, who made a mistake, no question about it. But over there, it's a lot more severe of a mistake than it is here. As I said, I don't think leaders should seek out the attaboys and stuff like that. But I do think those tweets are effective because I do think most Americans agree that the father should be a little more appreciative.
Do you think that Donald Trump is putting out a tweet like that to stage sort of a diversionary tactic, a distraction from, say, the tax issue or from Roy Moore and what's happening in Alabama?
I don't know the answer to that, but if he is, it's pretty effective. We're talking about it right now, and I know you guys have talked about it before me, too.
And I mean, okay, I hear you. I think you're right. But is that good? Should we be distracted by things like this?
No, I mean, I'd rather talk about other things, of course, like our bill with Tulsi Gabbard and other things. No, but like I said, if that's a good question that you have, if that was his intention, it worked.
Okay, your wish is my command. So let's get to that piece of legislation because it is new and it is really important. So you and Tulsi Gabbard have this legislation that is, I mean, this is in light of what happened, the horrible massacre that we witnessed at the church in Sutherland Springs, Texas, that killed 26 people, including children. And this gunman had a violent past. Let me remind people, I'll put it up on the screen, of who this guy was. He had been charged in 2012 with assault and battery against his wife. He had choked her, pulled her hair, kicked her. He had, I believe, charged with an aggravated assault against his stepson, who was an infant, cracked his skull. 4 charges involving firearms that were dropped in a plea deal. Then in 2014, charged with animal cruelty. He did kick a dog there and punched a dog. Given bad conduct discharge from the USAF. So how would your legislation change what had happened in Texas?
Sure. So I think that, a lot of folks, with these shootings, they want something done, of course. And, when you hear reasonable, when you hear common sense, this is a measure that would do that would actually prevent things without taking people's Second Amendment rights away. When you look at studies with gun violence and you look at folks that have committed domestic abuses, they are more likely to use gun violence against others, of course, a lot of times with people they know. But this bill would require the military, which the Uniform Code of Military Justice doesn't necessarily match up with the civilian code completely. So the Air Force had come out and said that they had failed in reporting this person to the national database, which had prevented him from getting a gun. The Army came out and said the same, that they had underreported as well. So this bill with myself and Mrs. Gabbard would require the military, all of DOD, within 3 days to report domestic abuses that are convicted there. Again, the language is different between the military justice system and the civilian one, but this would deal with that and then perhaps prevent. Doesn't take care of all gun violence. Obviously, you're not going to have 100% security, but it would make sure that the folks that are domestic abusers are reported to that system, therefore potentially preventing them, if it's felonious, from getting a gun.
And do you think that your bill goes far enough in preventing mass shootings or gun violence, or would you like to see other measures taken as well as your bill?
Unfortunately, the reality is any law that you create isn't going to prevent all mass shootings. It's just, or potential. I think that is a false notion, a false narrative that you hear. But this bill is a common sense, is a reasonable measure that closes a loophole that is necessary for reporting to make sure that people who shouldn't be getting firearms should not, or do not get them, excuse me.
Understood. Okay, Congressman Scott Scheller, thank you very much for explaining it to us today. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Chris.
All right, another big story. One of the first accusers who says Alabama Senate nominee Roy Moore sexually abused her when she was just 14 is speaking out in her first TV interview. Lee Korfman. What does she say about their encounter? Next. One of the first women to accuse Alabama Senate nominee Roy Moore of inappropriately touching her when she was only 14 just spoke out in her first TV interview. Her name is Lee Korfman, and she describes in detail what she says happened when she met with Moore, accusing him of preying on her. CNN's Caitlin Collins is live in Gadsden, Alabama with more. What do we learn?
Well, Chris, Lee Korfman is really the woman who opened the floodgates of these accusations against Roy Moore when she came out with her story about him in an interview with the Washington Post. Now, she was only 14 years old when she was at a courthouse here in Gadsden, Alabama, where Roy Moore is from, when a man who was in his 30s approached her and her mother and offered to watch her while her mother went inside for a custody hearing. Now, of course, that man was Roy Moore, and he got Korfman's number and later took her to his house, and here's what she said happened from there, Chris. Now, Roy Moore has denied these allegations and said it's all part of a conspiracy between the media and the Republican establishment to derail his campaign. But Lee Korfman said this morning she was not paid to make these accusations against Moore, and in fact, she's voted Republican for years. But for her, this isn't political, she said. It's personal. Chris and Allison?
Caitlin, thank you very much. So, listen, it's always more powerful to hear from the person. We've read her accounts, we know the story, but to hear from her, herself, and what happened, that does feel different. It does. To hear those details, suddenly, I don't know, it does feel really more intense and graphic. And it matters more than usual because ordinarily, if there's going to be a trial, if we hear from one side, all right, that's good, or both sides, that's good, but it's not about just us and them. It's about a jury, it's about a judge, it's about a prosecution and a defense. Not here. For people saying, well, he's guilty, he's innocent until proven guilty. That's true, but only in that context. This is the court of public opinion. This is only going to be about what you think about what she said, how it is offset by what he's able to offer up, like that he was assigned to her divorce case, it didn't come up sooner, those kinds of things, his denials. And then you get to make a decision, the lawmakers make a decision, the Alabama voters make a decision. This is the only process we'll have. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear the rest of her interview as well. She says that she did consider many times going more public in a more national way, but she did tell friends and family at the time. There is corroboration with most of these accounts. You have to read the Washington Post reporting and the reporting that's come afterwards. Too many people are having opinions without doing that. There you go. Meanwhile, President Trump calls on the NFL to suspend Raiders star Marshawn Lynch for sitting during the national anthem. Coy Wire has more in the Bleacher Report. What do you know, Coy?
Good morning, Allison. President Trump was up early blasting yet another figure from the sports world. First, LeVar Ball, this time beast mode, Marshawn Lynch. The Raiders running back has been sitting during the national anthem all season long, and he said it's not a protest, just something he's always done. Well, yesterday, before the Raiders-Patriots game in Mexico City, Lynch sat for the anthem, but then stood for Mexico's anthem. President Trump tweeted saying, quote, Marshawn Lynch of the NFL's Oakland Raiders stands for the Mexican anthem and sits down to booze for our national anthem. Great disrespect. Next time, NFL should suspend him for remainder of season. Attendance and ratings way down. Now, Marshawn Lynch has not said much about the ongoing anthem protest, but he did wear a shirt last month before a game that said everybody versus Trump. Chris?
All right, we see the president doing what he does very well here, picking an issue that he knows divides people that may play to his base and doubling down. President Trump also reshaping the late-night landscape.
Well, it's been about 6 months since President Trump has given an interview to a TV news organization other than Fox News. Will he ever do a hard news interview again? Let's discuss with CNN senior media correspondent and host of Reliable Sources, Brian Stelter. So these have not been terribly challenging interviews that he's done with Fox News. No indication that he'll ever do a challenging interview again.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out how unusual this is. I had a segment on my program yesterday just noting it's been more than 6 months now. If you remember Lester Holt and President Trump at the White House the same week Trump fired James Comey, that's the last time we've seen President Trump in a sort of non-Fox News, sit-down TV news interview style.
And that interview caused some problems.
Because they came before in the TV age. They would go around every major network from time to time time. Even President Obama, who didn't like Fox, once in a while appeared on Fox. We aren't seeing President Trump do that. And I wonder, actually, a couple months from now, we're going to have the Super Bowl. That's usually a big moment for a presidential interview. If President Trump will even avoid those sorts of
Who has it this year?
NBC.
Okay.
So that would be Matt Lauer or Savannah Guthrie or Lester Holt. You know, so far, President Trump doesn't seem to want to appeal to those major network audiences. He doesn't do 60 Minutes. He obviously doesn't do CNN. But it really is unusual compared to what we've seen from past presidents.
Look, the obvious question is, why would he, right? I mean, so far, what he's trying to cultivate in terms of his base, he doesn't need to. Can he grow his tent, get ready for the next election? That's the challenge. So another reason he's not going on is because he's getting beat up on a regular basis. We see that specifically in late-night TV.
Right.
What's your take on that? We know it's the subject of this big special you got.
Yeah, we have a special tonight. We wanted to spend several months looking at how late-night TV has changed because of President Trump, because it really has become more polarized, much more political. I think in some ways, these shows, whether it's Stephen Colbert or Seth Meyers or now Jimmy Kimmel, they're actually channeling liberal angst better than Democratic politicians are. They've captured the moment, this kind of anti-Trump moment in America, in some ways better than politicians, better than liberal news anchors.
What's it doing for their numbers?
The shows are basically still at election level. So normally, you have an election, then the ratings trail off, whether it's for news or comedy. Not anymore. It's because we're sort of in this permanent campaign.
I want to show a couple of clips of SNL. Kate McKinnon, as you know, has been spot on.
Yes, there were multiple reports the president was particularly upset about the fact that it was a woman playing one of his aides. And now, just when you thought SNL couldn't top Melissa McCarthy playing Sean Spicer, I think they've done it with this Jeff Sessions impersonation.
But now, she's like the kind of the gremlin version of Jeff Sessions, like Alfred Newman mixed with Jeff Sessions.
And a ferret.
Yes, and
mixed in a ferret.
Some type of marmot.
You've thought about this. I appreciate it.
I have.
Yeah, she also played Julian Assange on Saturday. She could essentially do the whole show. It could be a one-woman show. She's outstanding, and she's really the breakout star of the year on SNL.
So it's been a boon for late night.
Yeah.
And what else are we going to learn in your special?
Yeah, I think in some ways you can make the case that these shows are also changing President Trump, or at least changing his audience's, his fan base's feelings. When these shows attack President Trump on a nightly basis, it also causes some of the people you interviewed for your focus group to dig in their heels further. I think when we interviewed some of these comedians, some of these producers, there's a concern they have kind of deep down inside that they're just preaching to the choir, that they're not actually changing any minds. And that's one of the themes of tonight's special.
The opportunity will be in the bridge. That's what we're seeing right now. There is fomenting going on. The president is savvy on this. We're seeing late night pick up on it to their own advantage. But who's going to bridge? Who will be the bridge in this situation?
Chris Cuomo?